Death is the unyielding truth that binds us all, an inevitable, profound, and deeply intimate encounter with the finite nature of life. It arrives without warning, shattering the world we thought we knew. In its wake, grief emerges, often dismissed as something to fix or get over. But what if grief, in its suffocating pain, is not a burden to carry or something from which we need to move on? What if grief is instead a sacred invitation, an opening to feel more deeply, to connect in unimaginable ways, and to transform all that we knew to be true? I'm Laura Walton, and I'm so grateful you're here. Together, let's step into the uncharted terrain of death and grief, not as something to fear or avoid, but as a force that shapes us, breaks us, and ultimately remakes us. Let's meet it not with resistance, but with curiosity and courage. And let's do this on purpose. Welcome back to Grief on Purpose, the podcast. I am here with guest Tara Accardo. Oh, I knew I was going to botch that. Tara Accardo today. So hi, Tara. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So can you share your perspective from what you can recall on how we became connected?
Yes. Oh my God. Well, first of all, I've had you on my podcast.
Yes.
That episode, I think, as of the time of this recording at least, has not gone out yet, but it's going to go out fairly soon.
Okay.
And we just had a really beautiful conversation. I think I remember like before we even had that conversation, like I just really resonated with your story, and just like many guests that come on, like all of us might experience grief and loss differently, even if we've lost the same person, right? Let's say two people have lost a mom. That relationship with that person, it's so different, but there's just like universal things about grief and loss that I think so many of us can relate to on just like a cellular, soulful level. And that's why I love conversations like this, because even if someone can't necessarily relate to my story of losing both parents and a pet and going through a traumatic birth experience and all of these things, there's just that's what's so beautiful about these conversations, is it really just opens up just that vulnerability, and it allows us to normalize these conversations. And that's what I loved about our recording on mine, is just like just raw and real. And I don't know, I live for these conversations.
Yeah, I know. I love talking about death.
Grief
I
and
always
death
joke
and
about,
loss. It's great.
yes. But it's because, for me, it's real. It's part of my lived experience,
Yeah.
and being able to like name it and talk about it and hear other people's stories, while they're not, the exact same,
Mhm.
they're at least more similar than the stories nobody's talking about, so to be
Absolutely.
able to have that connection, is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the name of your podcast?
So my podcast is called the Life with Grief podcast. And yeah, I mean, as the name implies, we do talk about grief and loss, but I love digging into other topics as well, because I think a lot of people I have on, but even myself included, we might have experienced the death of a loved one. I think that's very common with my audience, but there's so much more to loss. There's loss of identity. Maybe you've had to move, and whether that's stemmed from like one big major loss or that's just your reality. Okay, how do we cope with that? I just recently recorded an episode of like how to like the process of going through our loved ones' belongings when they die, right? Who's talking about that? So it's just there's so many nuances and so many layers, and it affects us in so many aspects of our life for so much longer than just the first year, right? So, funny enough, my podcast was originally the Losses Become Gains podcast, because I never have a good way of wording this, but sort of my parent brand, if you will. It's like how I originally started in the grief space, and that's still very much alive and well. But when I started the podcast, I started it with that thinking it would be very aligned. But then maybe like a year or so in, I actually changed the name. First of all, if I'm being very honest, it was just for searchability too, because I'm just like, I don't think people are going to like know what losses become gains quite means. And I want this to be very obvious what it's about. But again, just to bring it back to what I was saying, there's so much more to life with grief. And those are the conversations I want to have, and having people like you on, where it's like, okay, what do we do? What do we do with our life? What do we make of our life? how can we maybe find purpose, right? To bring it back to the
Mhm.
title of yours. What does that look like? What does that feel like? How can we go about doing that? So that's what I really like to talk about. And so I have guests, I have solo episodes. That podcast is now at 2 times a week. So I just want to really meet people where they're at and just have really, again, very honest conversations about what living life after a loss, whatever that loss looks like, really means and what that,
Yeah.
again, looks and feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a big question.
Mhm.
Where do you live? I don't know if I know
I'm in
this.
California. So, yeah, I'm in
Okay.
Northern California. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
And other than podcasting, is there anything else you do with your life?
Yes, too many things. I am a wife and a mother. I have a beautiful, but she's a little over a year and a half-year-old daughter now. That has been a whirlwind of a journey, but I'm very, very blessed. And I actually also have a second podcast. I think I actually launched this maybe since you and I recorded last, possibly. But anyway, it's with my husband. And so we co host a podcast called Taste Toast Travel. And actually, I'm mentioning this because it ties in a little bit to this element of life with grief, right? So in my, let me say, earlier days of grieving, I travel and my love of food and drink has been with me for a very long time. But in my early days of grief, I think I was just so lost in it, so stuck in it, so just in the muddied waters that like I never could have imagined first of all that I'd be a grief and soul purpose coach, that I would have a grief podcast, that I would have this food, drink and travel podcast, any of these things that I'm kind of doing now. But I think in allowing myself to be open as I've continued on in this journey and get curious. And I mentioned I'm a soul purpose coach. So, like, literally tapping into my own soul's purpose of like, okay, what? Because I think a lot of questions grievers ask ourselves, like, what am I doing here? Like, we kind of go through like this
Yeah.
existential crisis,
Yeah.
whether or not we realize it, of like, who am I? Now, after all of this, what am I doing here? I say that kind of jokingly, but seriously. And what really lights me up now? So, as much as I love and can appreciate being in like the weeds of grief, and I love grief coaching and I love being that ally and that person for people, as I've kind of gone through my own journey of grief and loss, that's it's unlocked so many things for me. And I am so much more than just the deaths of my parents and the grief and the loss stuff. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of people actually in this grief space now. There's this weird kind of collective thing happening that I'm seeing, that a lot of us, and for many of us, we're years out from our loss now. So I think we're just naturally discovering, like, again, those things that excite us and spark joy.
Yeah.
And for me, it was leaning into that travel aspect, the food, the drink, the culture, all of it. And it's so beautiful. And I mentioned I lived in Northern California. So both my husband and I, at least currently, also still work in the wine industry. Fun fact about me. And
Mhm.
I work in marketing. And it's a really big part of our life. It has been for a long time. My husband's a certified sommelier. So wine's big, but we bonded over food and drink and traveling. 3 months after we started dating, we moved to Italy for 3 months. It was, it's just, and I won't get into that whole story, but it's a big part of like the root of our relationship, who we are as people, all the things. So it's just these passions that we can and inevitably will, if we allow it to happen, uncover as we continue living our life with grief in
Mhm.
tow, right? The loss of, let's just say, a loved one will never not affect us in some way. We're always going to feel that. But I definitely don't. I'm not of the belief that our grief can kind of never go away. It
Mm.
evolves. It softens over time. I think a lot of people might hear the analogy of like a wound, right? A flesh wound.
Yeah.
And I have plenty of scars, right? From various things over my lifetime. But like, so yeah, I can remember it. It never goes away. Yeah, sometimes it might act up and kind of bug us a little bit, but that is a big part of this process, I think, that I've really discovered and tapped into
Yep.
and allowed myself to. And I think that's where a lot of grievers can get a little bit stuck, is we don't always allow those things to unfold naturally. And so that's a lot of the work that I do too, is just facilitating that, being a guide and an
Mhm.
ally in that process.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you're talking about that because that has been kind of a place where I've been finding myself too
Yeah.
recently as it relates to my grief. And like I'm in a very different place than I was before. And in a place
Right.
that honestly, in some ways, if I could have told my younger self I would ever be in this place, it would sound absolutely terrifying, terrible
Yeah.
and horrifying and like
Right.
offensive almost that it would be possible to be, when the greatest loss in your life happens, to
Mhm.
imagine that you can be enjoying your life again and
Dare we
doing
say
things
happy?
doing other things like that is unfathomable at a certain point in
Yep.
grief. So anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's where I'm finding myself too. And then that's redefining the whole question of what is grief, and how
Yes.
do
Oh
we
my God.
navigate it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So glad to hear I'm not the only one.
No, definitely not. Like, again, I really am feeling the shift a little bit. And I think that's what's really cool about the soul purpose coaching. Like, it's not a new concept at all in terms of like what we might do in a grief coaching or in a soul purpose coaching session, but it's actually very ancient, a lot of the things. But I think people are kind of like, okay, even with grief coaching, they're like, okay, what is a grief coach? What is a soul
Yeah.
purpose coach? And how does that work? And how is it different than therapy and counseling? And there is a difference. And there's a time and place for both of those. I appreciate therapy very much. But yeah, the work we do is very different. We are looking kind of at like, okay, at present, like where are we at? What's our hurdles? What are we struggling with? What are we facing right now? And then taking baby steps to move forward from there. And yeah, I think it's those baby steps. It's those little micro moments that I think for me have been like genuinely life changing. And yeah, and I can see that in you too, and lots of
Mhm.
people that I talk with. And so it's cool. It's cool seeing more of that come to life and that becoming more normalized and talked about. And it's encouraging. I'm like, finally.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you describe the soul purpose coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, it's interesting. I became a grief coach first, and then I fell into this soul purpose coaching certification. I'll get more into like the technical details in a second, but it was it really came up because that was like really where I was leaning into in my own life. I felt between the coaching and my podcast and some of the things I was doing that I was really like aligning with and finally tapping into my soul's purpose here. And it's really interesting. I had someone ask me very nicely, much more nicely than how I'm about to verbalize this, but they were basically like, "Do you feel like your parents like died or had to die for you to like do the work that you're doing now or to get to this point?"
Mhm.
And I was like, "Well, that's heavy. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe." And I know that and I listen to a lot of different podcasts and just spiritual leaders and teachers and things that and there's a lot of differing opinions out there, but I do hear a lot of people say that like yeah, a lot of some of these things are predetermined. Not everything. We have free will, we have choices. I could choose not to do a podcast on grief and loss, but I chose to do that. And so it's like, what do we choose to do? What do we lean into? But so I think that was just naturally unfolding for me, and then this certification fell into my orbit, and I got that through the highest I think they rebranded, but I think it's the Highest Self Institute, I'm pretty sure. I think they have, like, 2 or 3 different certifications. It's changed a little bit since I've done it, and some people call themselves different things, but ultimately it's that soul purpose coaching, and when I work with people, a lot of the clients that I will work with, typically people find me because they have been through a loss of some kind, typically that of a loved one, and unlike with the grief coaching, which is definitely more for those that are a bit more in the weeds and really struggling with the day to day, not sure how to like damn near even function while trying to also work and do all the things that we're under pressure to do in our daily life, because unfortunately the world does not stop when we lose someone. The soul purpose coaching takes that a step further. And so a lot of people that come to me, honestly, it's like I market them differently, but it's very under the same umbrella. Like it's just where someone is on the spectrum. And so people that will come to me for that, like I said, they've been through something, but they feel that they're managing it pretty well. But you'd be amazed at how often the grief still comes up in conversations and things that have actually been unresolved. But they're like, I know something more is out there for me. I want to know what's next. I'm really confused on how to do that. I don't know where to start. I need a guide. I need an ally. I need someone to help walk me through this. And again, kind of that back to like, who am I now? What am I meant to do here? All of that. And it's tapping into that. We look at a lot of different things. I utilize human design. Dharma archetypes or something I learned in that particular certification. It was a 6-month long certification. It was really beautiful experience. So we utilize that. There's like a lot of different like kind of modalities and things that we look at to kind of just get a better understanding of our strengths and what we're interested in, quite frankly, like just even just interests, right? Like I said, I have interests outside of all of this grief work that I do. So just yeah, digging into that and feeling it out and in what ways they could bring that to life to and for a lot of people it's like getting out of a job too that doesn't really light them up. So it could be not grief from the death of a loved one. It could just be I've had people that it is because of a job or they were laid off and they're like, I want to use this opportunity to pivot. And I've also been through a pivot myself, so I can empathize with that a lot. Been through a couple pivots. And again, they just need some help kind of like walking through that. So it's yeah, without getting too in the weeds, that's what that process looks like. Of course, it depends on
Yeah.
the person, but yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Prior to experiencing your parents' deaths, what were you doing with your life? Something very different?
I was blissfully unaware of anything grief related. No, I had lost a grandmother. I lost one of my cousins in a really tragic car accident. I was maybe like 10 or 11 when that happened. I've lost a grandfather. I've lost people and I grieved each of those. I was definitely younger when a lot of that happened. And I think I grieved what I could at the time for being the ages that I were. Of course, nothing can prepare you for losing someone in your close knit inner circle family,
Mhm.
like a parent, a child, a sibling, you know. And yeah, honestly, I was just again working in the wine industry. I was working in marketing. I was just living my life. I was just dating my husband, my now husband at the time, like just being a 20 something, just doing her thing. And then my mom got sick. And I don't necessarily have to go into this whole story, but for those who don't know, I lost both of my parents to cancer within 6 months of each other. And so nothing could have prepared me for that. It is true trial by fire with all of that. And yeah, so I just, again, I was like, I was touched by grief, but pretty untouched by real, like major loss.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like their deaths for you might have brought about that kind of existential crisis that you were talking about earlier. Yeah.
1,000%. Yeah. And I should also mention for those who, well, I definitely, it's not really necessarily something to believe in or not per se, but for those who are familiar, I guess I could say with our, oh, what's it called? I'm blanking on that. I was going to say Mercury in retrograde. That's not it. Our Saturn return.
Mm.
So that's something that happens, I think, every 27 and a half years or something like that. I might be botching that, but it's like, for a lot of us, it happens first time around, like in our late 20s. And I realized when I looked up like the exact dates of what my Saturn return was, it was verbatim when my parents died. I was like,
Mm.
okay, well,
Mm.
that's an interesting turn of events.
Interesting. Yes.
And yeah, and it's a just a time where you are, it is a bit of a trial by fire time. And not that you have to like lose someone via a death during that time, but it's just, it's a time of major transition. And I'm not a Saturn return expert, so I won't go into detail there, but it was just really interesting to become aware of that. I did not become aware of that until years later, actually more recently within the last year realizing that as well. And so, yeah, it definitely kicked off an existential crisis of
Yeah.
sorts. But I mean, the biggest learning experience of my life is that classic, like, they don't teach you this stuff in school. They don't teach you how to manage your parents' estate when they both die back to
No.
back, or the probate process, or what to do again with like their condo and all of their things. And I don't have any siblings. So I know that people that have siblings that their life is also a living hell because maybe they're not helpful or they're putting up a fight or you know, so I always like to say just because you have siblings doesn't mean it's easy, but and just because you're an only child doesn't mean it's easier or harder. They're two completely different situations.
Yeah.
I can just speak as an only child, like it's brutal. I still have the days where I'm just like, no one understands me. Like,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
my husband, no one, because no one can and will ever understand what it is to be the daughter of Greg and Lori Jordan. And even if
Mhm.
I did have a sibling, that means something different to each sibling. So it was just a very, I mean, just humbling experience to say the
Mhm.
very least.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's life changing.
Yeah. When did that happen? How many years ago?
So my mom died December of 2019 and my dad died July of 2020. So right in the height of COVID. My mom was right
Oh,
before, dad was right during it.
oh
And
my
his health
gosh.
decline was during all of that. I also went through a breakup during that time. It was not a good time for me at all.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I even like saying that. I'm like thinking back to that time and it's those visceral reactions to like everything going on. But I also like, I was so there and present, but I also feel like I blacked some stuff out. And it's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
COVID
Yeah.
was crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I want to, an interesting space here because I want to leave like space for you to share whatever it is you might want to share about your parents and about their deaths. But I also, from my experience and what we're talking about and being at this different place in your grief, for me,
Mhm.
there are parts of me that are like, I am over my story, like the
Yes.
because my experience of it is so different than it was then. And so for me personally, sometimes telling my story doesn't do a lot for me. And it's
Yeah.
not something it's not a place where I want to spend my time.
Mhm.
So I want to open that up to you, like to
Yeah.
whatever feels right for you. If you want to share and talk about your parents, their deaths, whatever might be wrapped up in that, or if that doesn't
Mhm.
feel like a part of who you are right now, then that's okay too.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. It's so true. And in podcasting, I've told my story many, many times. And I never get tired, obviously, of talking about my parents, but yeah, I've definitely gotten to this place where I'm like, and I knew this originally too, there's so much more than their cancer.
Mm-hmm.
That does not define them. Was it traumatizing? Absolutely. So I guess I will start there and more just acknowledging anyone else out there. And this is where I'm like, please get the help if you need it. Work with a grief coach, work with a therapist, whatever. Like, we don't, I think, realize how traumatizing some of these situations are. Yeah, maybe while we're in it, we realize it, but like until we're out of it. And actually, I literally posted on something on social media today where last night I had, I'm not even gonna call it a dream. It was a nightmare. Very long story short, and this is honestly all I can even remember of the dream. My dad, it was like very true to what happened in real life. He was sick, his health was declining. During that time of my life, I was not in the best place in my relationship, hence the reason it ended, but it was with my now husband. So, spoiler alert, we got back together, but that was also a journey. That's a podcast for another day. But I was going through that, had just grieving my mom, who had just died months prior, barely months prior, and caring for a geriatric dog and working full time, not fully understanding like how precious kind of all of that time was with them. Like if I could go back and do anything differently, it would just be to like put work a little bit more on the back burner. I did in a lot of ways and honest I wore myself into the ground commuting to my mom's hospital where she was cuz she had esophageal cancer. She had to get a tracheotomy at one point. I had to grieve never hearing her speak again, never coming home again, that anticipatory grief of like her death because we could see it coming. And then months later, anticipating my dad's death because I could see it coming. I was like, whose life am I even like living right now?
Yeah.
So all of those things, it's really scarring. And so when my dad's health started declining in early 2020, basically the cancer, his prostate cancer just metastasized. It went into his back and into his brain. And there were, I don't know, I feel maybe some like lingering guilt that I wasn't like there for him enough. I don't know. But basically this dream was like, I was like living far away from him or whatever. And I feel like I wasn't maybe like keeping tabs on him. And like basically he died and I didn't have a way to get a hold of him. And someone else found him and had to tell me. And I was like, oh my God, this is like
Mm.
that was like my worst nightmare is like not being there enough for my dad. And I think a lot of that stems from this one day where he was, again, the cancer had really started affecting his brain at this point. And I came into the house and I found him not in a good state. I won't go into detail, but just kind of catatonic essentially. And I was like, oh my God, this is really, really bad. And I've thought about that moment so many times after. And I was like, what could I have done differently? Why wasn't I helping him more? Why did I stay at my house with my then boyfriend, now husband at the time? Like, why wasn't I there for my dad more? Why didn't I just move in and try and
Mhm.
take care of him? replaying those thoughts all the time. And I think it still haunts me because that dream didn't just come from nowhere,
Yeah.
but nothing triggered that either. So I tell this story specifically because I want to normalize that. I'm 5 years out from losing my dad now, and this stuff is still coming up. It's still in my subconscious. It still affects me. And
Mhm.
I thought I forgave myself for that. I thought I released a lot of it, and I have. I was much younger. Yes, I had been through everything with my mom, but I was grieving my absolute best friend. My dad was my best friend too, but like this mother-daughter bond that I will never have again. I'm experiencing it now with my daughter. It's very, very special, but and that's just heightened that relationship with my mom for me. Not having her here has been excruciating. Not having my dad here has been excruciating. And so I forgive myself for what I was doing at the time. I was doing the best that I could, balancing everything that I had going on. But that doesn't mean that guilt just like miraculously goes away, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, all of that to say, it's been a journey. And I think a lot of grievers can relate to this. It's a journey letting ourselves off the hook for some of those things that we
Mhm.
did or didn't know better of at the time. That self-forgiveness and having compassion and patience with ourselves. And all of that's been a huge journey for me. I think I briefly mentioned I lost my dog. I won't get into that whole thing, but there was some guilt that I harbored around how she died. She basically got this like rabies shot that I had her get like against my intuition. I just had a feeling she didn't need it. The vet was very pushy about it. I did it. 2 days later, she died because she had
Oh,
seizure after seizure. That was traumatizing and scarring because, and then
yeah.
I literally felt like I killed my dog because I was like, Tara, you made that decision
Mm.
to have her get that shot against you. And literally, basically, the only reason they wanted her to get that was so that I could like get the medication she needed for her arthritis and all these other things. And I was like, and I harbored a lot of anger towards that vet for a very long
Mhm.
time. There's been such a range of emotions and these things that I've had to work through for years that
Mhm.
clearly still is not. That's where I'm just like, in our grief, is it ever totally unresolved? I don't know. As a grief
Mhm.
coach, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't think so. But that doesn't mean that we have to stay stuck in that pain or that guilt or that regret every single day, right? Like
Mhm.
that's why it is such a process of, again, I'm going to mention the patience, the self-compassion, the forgiveness of ourselves and and at the end of the day, I tell myself, and sometimes this lands better than other days, but you can't go back. Can't go back and change anything. And I know my parents don't fault me for anything. I know my parents. I know that. And they're good wherever they are, wherever you choose to believe your loved one is. Like these human emotions that we have, like all I'm convinced that no matter where they are, like it is love and joy and abundance and all of these beautiful things beyond what we can even begin to imagine in this
Mm.
human body, in this human experience. And so I just chalk a lot of that up to that. But it's hard being down here struggling with this sometimes. And so it is a process. And that's where I think in having a lot of those really honest conversations with myself and allowing myself to evolve as a woman, as a wife, as a mom, and going through all of these things without my parents. It has given me a strength I maybe didn't know I had before, or tapped into in my 20s, but it looks and feels so different now in my early 30s. And now again as a parent myself, it's unlocking new things but there's also new layers of grief that I've had to cope
Yeah.
with, not having my parents, watching my in-laws with my daughter. I love that. It's wonderful, but I'm also so sad that my parents don't get that I don't get that selfishly to watch them do that. And it's just, I could go on, but
Mm.
it's just a testament to the fact that, it's why my podcast is called Life with Grief, right? Because
Yeah.
it just keeps unfolding so
Yes.
much more
Yeah.
than just
Yeah.
that first year. And people don't realize that. I think a lot of grievers do, right? But then everyone else out there who wants to be judgy or wants to put a time frame on things or insert their opinion on how we should not be operating. That's why I'm like, please just sit down and be quiet and stay in your lane because like you don't know. You think you
Yes.
might know, but you don't. And so, yeah,
Mm.
it's continuous.
Continuous. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I think forever, because as we continue to live, life continues to bring things
Yeah.
into,
Yeah.
into our experience. And those things continue to be things that our people are not here for, or
Yeah.
that there's some meaning that is lost with their absence
Yes.
in it. So, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How how did you like what were the initial steps? You talked about baby steps earlier.
Yeah.
Like how did you start walking this path at the very beginning, right when your world had just been exploded with their
Yeah.
deaths?
Yeah. I'll address this more from after my dad died because with my mom, again, there was still so much kind of turmoil with my dad still being sick and then declining and all the things. So I'll start from like after they died. So July 2020 onwards. What did that look like? I think initially, and again, I was like, my now husband and I were like rekindling things at that point. We were talking again, but I was also like, sir, not ready. Just been through like really massive tragedy. So if this were to happen again, like we need a whole different approach to this relationship because I am not going back. And he didn't want to go back either, right? We wanted that blank slate. So I won't get into all of that necessarily. Really, that just took a lot of communication, some very, very honest conversations that we weren't having before. It went well, obviously. But so there was a lot of that. I do think having his support again was really important. But I'll be so honest with you. I'm so grateful for that breakup. It happened, I can't remember, April or May, I think. So it was before my dad died. And at the time, of course, it was devastating. And that time where I did find my dad that I was mentioning, like again, catatonic on the bed, and I had to like call the ambulance for him, that was the same night that we broke up. So
Oh.
that was like outside of my mom dying and then the day my dad died, that was like top three worst days for me,
Mhm.
probably ever. But I was so glad I was single through all of that because that, and this is where it comes back around, have that forgiveness for yourself because then I could be there for my dad. I think that relationship at that point, how it was really draining me and it was taking a lot from me. My cup was not being filled and I needed to be there for my dad. And then again, COVID and then like trying to see him in his hospice facility and all that. It was too much. It was too hard. So I'm so glad I had that. And so that being single did continue a little while longer. I can't remember when we like officially got back together, but it was a little while after my dad died. And so I've actually had an episode on this in like embracing that aloneness and that alone time. I don't want anyone to be lonely. Let me just like clarify that, right? Loneliness is really scary and I I never want anyone to feel lonely. Like they don't have anyone to turn to and all of that because that can get very scary. I think the difference that I always like to kind of differentiate is like there is a difference between being lonely and then like embracing our alone time, getting to know ourself again, being able to hear our own thoughts, witness our grief, really allow ourselves to feel it as painful as it is. And I know it's painful, but really allowing that and to just like comprehend what has happened. And I don't think I would have been able to do that clearly if I had like still been like in that relationship and doing all just figuring that out. And so it was just me and my dog at the time and I went on daily walks. I leaned on friends as much as I could. Again, people some could understand, some couldn't, but just having people in my corner, journaling. This is all very basic things I'm putting out
Mhm.
there. I know, but like I'm huge on journaling. I created my own journal for a reason. The Losses Become Gains daily journal, like specifically for grief. Is like the what I wish I had like in my early days of grief. And it's just those simple practices every day. Frankly, having to take my dog out to go to the bathroom probably helped a lot because it physically got me out of the house.
Yeah.
I did continue working after I don't know how long, but my employer was very understanding. They know I had been through a lot. But frankly, I think it did help. Watching a lot of comfort shows, I think The Office, Heart of Dixie, just being alone and getting to know like this version of myself who is I always consider myself to be a daughter. Like if anybody is just, oh yeah, well your parents died, so you're I've my own grandmother called me an orphan, my mom's mom. And I was
Mm.
like, I don't resonate with that word at all. I'm not an orphan. I feel like that just like means like my parents like left me on a doorstep.
Yeah.
I'm just like they didn't want to leave, but like yes, okay, I guess by definition I'm an orphan, but I'm like no, that doesn't resonate with me. But just that like who am I as this independent woman gonna be turning 30 in a year or two like and so I was kind of forced into that process of that, what I was saying earlier, that existential crisis, like the who am I? What am I doing here? What do I want? I almost moved to LA. I was looking at moving. I just wanted to get out of here. That was not going to happen with probate and all the things, but wishful thinking. And yeah, I just got curious and I started exploring. And in doing that, I think it gave me confidence in that relationship. So I was very clear going forward what I wanted and what I didn't want. I had that clarity that I didn't have before. Same thing with job stuff. Just allowing myself to go through all of that, it bled into so many other aspects of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I was so glad that I found the tools that worked well for me. For me, it was movement, it was getting outside, it was having a good support system, podcasts, honestly, even not grief related podcasts. I'll be very honest, like marketing podcasts because I work in marketing. It was like I was like, okay, what can I do with that? And absorbing other like information and inspiration from other sources. But that also being said, balancing that with like quiet time and Terra time and time to again hear my own thoughts. I think it's very important that we do both of those things because we intake so much information nowadays with podcasts, with books, with social media, with all the things. So it's like we gotta let that quiet time come in too. But I also read the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle Melton. That also kind of changed my life. Highly recommend that book. And yeah, I think I was just also very led into certain resources that ended up really helping me too. I also did go to therapy for a few months to just talk through a lot of it too. So yeah, just leaning into what felt good, leaving what didn't, and just kind of getting in touch with my gut again of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yeah, this feels good. This resonates. No, this does not feel good. This does not resonate. And I lean on my gut now for any decision I make and all of that. But I think that process was really important to
Mm-hmm.
get back in touch with her, with my soul, you know?
Hmm. I love that. It's
Yeah.
beautifully articulated and just like kind of slowing it down, getting quiet enough to come back to yourself
Yes.
and come back to yourself, but also come to this brand
Yes.
new version of
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yep. And we're always evolving, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, there's this new version of me, but I'm pretty sure I've been through like another version or two, even since
Yeah,
that girl came about. And so it's a beautiful process to watch
it
unfold, you
is.
know?
It is. If we can allow it, if we can
Mhm.
lean
That's
into
step
it
one.
and yeah, lean into it instead of running away from it,
Yeah.
which I know is so difficult.
Yeah, resisting. And again, depending on and where anyone's listening from right now, like in their grief journey, that's why I always say just take what feels good and just like keep the rest in the back of your mind for
Yeah.
later. You know,
Yeah.
like some of these things I might be saying today might not resonate or hit for you. I say this all the time in my own podcast, but there were times in these books and these podcasts and whatever that I was absorbing at the time where I was maybe offended by it or I was just like,
Yeah.
this does not relate for me right now or whatever. But you hear it enough times, it does shift something in you.
Yeah.
So again, that's just like the cracking the door open
Yeah,
being open.
yeah. And it might mean something different to you at a later time.
Yes. Oh my God, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whereas maybe in the earliest states of grief, it's something you can't comprehend.
No. Yeah.
But
Over our heads. Yeah.
yeah, totally. Okay. Do you feel any connection with your parents?
Yeah, definitely. I wish more energetically. That's honestly something I'm working on. Like I really, because again, I've tapped into this more like spiritual side of myself,
Yeah.
since then. But I definitely believe in like signs and symbols and things. And I have my little signs and symbols that I ask them to show me if I want a specific direction on something, but also just whatever you want to call it, source, universe, God, whatever has its ways of making itself known, I feel like. But I also do there's this really beautiful deck called the Angels and Auras deck. It's
Mm.
by oh my gosh, I don't want Fraser. My gosh, what are their names? I'm mixing up their first and last names. It's like I think Bradley Valentine and something Fraser. I'm blanking on his first name. Anyway, it's this really beautiful deck, and every few days I'll do that, and I'll pull a card, and again I call on angels, my spirit guides, source, my parents, all the things, and I like throw out a question or just something I want like wisdom or a piece of guidance on or whatever, and then like really feel into that and pick a card. And there's just these like little practices that I've put into, and there's so many decks, by the way, of like, that if people are interested in that they could like look into. But it's just, that's a really beautiful way of doing it. But also, I'll be very honest, I've been to a medium many times since my parents died, probably at least once or twice a year. There's one I usually go to, but I've been to a few, and where I've definitely feel confident that I've connected with my parents. I know some people might be like iffy on mediums. I think it's very
Mhm.
important that you find one that you trust that gives you very specific validation and messages. And it's not, you can sniff
Yeah.
out a fake a mile away. But yeah, I've found some very good ones. And that has also been game changing because I definitely feel have been very connected with them through that. And so it's just, again, it's just for me, it's been very healing, very validating, and just keeping that line of communication alive. Because it is one of the hardest things, if probably not the hardest thing, is not having their physical presence here. We're so used to that, calling them, texting them being a part of our everyday. And it's horrible. It's horrible not having that. And it's very overwhelming at times to think about going the rest of our life without that.
Yeah.
I have moments where I'm like, holy moly, wow, this is a lifetime thing now. I'm never gonna. And it's scary. I almost now 5 years out, I'm like, oh my God, am I remembering things about them correctly? Am I would they know me now? Would I know them
Yeah.
now? Like all these crazy thoughts. I'm like, yeah, Tara, of course you would. They're your parents. But yeah, as we keep growing up and getting further away from, let's say again, it's the death of a loved one, like those are normal. I just want to validate anyone who maybe is there. Those are normal thoughts to have. I've spoken to many people that are worried about that they're worried
Yeah.
they're gonna forget their voice, their mannerisms, how their hand felt, all of those things. And I think about my parents a lot, of course. Sometimes I feel like I need to protect my heart and I maybe don't. And if I feel like it's just too much for me. But those are the types of things that I do try and remember. And it helps me feel close to them while still, again, trying not to like overwhelm myself with just the gravity of
Mhm.
these losses. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're giving us so many good tips and reminders, and I
Oh, good.
appreciate
I
that.
hope
So thank
so.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we said this at the beginning, and I say this every time, but like we could probably talk for 5 more hours
Oh, yeah.
about this,
100%.
but we don't have 5 more hours. So, is there anything else though now that feels important for you to say that hasn't been said yet?
Mm. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so many things. No, but I'll try and keep it to one or two. I think for anyone that is listening here, and it's hard because, like, it depends on, again, where people are in the spectrum of their grief. But I think if the day to day is still feeling heavy, if life has just seemed to continue going on and like, no, I don't have a better way of wording this, but like, no one cares about your loss as much as you do. I can empathize with that feeling. I know that feeling. That's so sacred because guess what? Even if other people are missing, I keep losing using a loved one today. Let's just stick with that. Everyone might miss that particular loved one in their own way, but no one is going to miss them or mourn them like you will. That
Mhm.
can feel very scary and a lot, and again, and very overwhelming. But I invite you to maybe just consider that to be such a beautiful and sacred thing because for me, again, like that was something I really had to grapple with. In the beginning, there was resentment around that. There was animosity that I was like the only one like kind of dealing with this. You know what I mean? But for my parents' siblings, they had to mourn them in their own way. And my poor grandmother who lost her daughter. Oh my God, I can only begin to imagine that loss. So for me, I just tried to shift my mindset around that as like, yeah, no one can understand this loss like I can. And how beautiful is it? How fortunate am I to be the
Mm.
only child of these two people? And even if you're not an only child, even if you're a sibling, you're still you, right? It's your own soul here. So just relishing in that, I think, as much as you can. And this has already been said, but I think it's just important to just reiterate, just crack the door open today. Again, like just I always like to invite people, like again, get curious, perhaps even get excited about what could be out there for you. And you have no idea. I don't think probably both you and I did not know these podcasts would ever come to fruition
Oh no.
a hot minute, a while ago. But here we are, and we're connected. We're having these beautiful, cathartic, amazing conversations. Other people are hearing these things too. Like, you just never know what might be ahead of you and is in your path, something that maybe you are meant to find or whatever. And I love to think that we are divinely led. Maybe our loved ones do have a hand in it. Who knows? That was one of the most beautiful things about one of my readings is I think one of the mediums was just like, we were talking about my daughter and they were like, but it was very specific. My mom for sure came through. It wasn't just like this medium saying this, but like confirming like they sent you your daughter. Like that
Mm.
was very intentional. That was they held her, they've met her, all the good things. But yeah, she was very specifically chosen for you. And that was just all of these things. So again, whether or not you believe in a medium, just just I am of the belief that our loved ones are still very much around, very much with us. Again, I am of the belief that we're all energy and there's in many ways we are renting this body. And so I understand that when we lose a loved one or something, like that's hard to wrap our head around because we're so used to hearing their voice, hugging them, kissing them, cuddling with them, whatever that is. And it's really hard for our brain to separate itself from the
Yeah.
physical body, from like the soul that we know them to be. But that is where I believe like they are an energy. And so that leads me just to my final point is like, just remember that your brain is still trying to make sense of all of that. And that does not happen overnight. And there's another, I'll throw out this other book, The Grieving Brain by Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor. She's incredible. She came out with another book too, The Grieving Body. I haven't read it yet, but looks amazing. But that book, I recommend it literally to every griever I possibly can because it does in a very digestible way help you understand like what is going on with your brain like
Mhm.
scientifically when
Yeah.
we lose a loved one or we go through a change or whatever and your brain's updating prediction patterns and all the things that I won't even get into right now. But I've said patience a lot in this episode, just coming back to that and understanding that again these things don't happen overnight, and hopefully some of the things we talked about today is just a testament to how these things can still come up years later, and you're not crazy for that. That's not doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Be in touch with yourself if you feel like you're getting stuck and it's prolonging your grief and you're like not okay. Seek the right help. Always encourage that. But also know that our society, I think especially here in America, still quite grief illiterate, still a lot of judgment around grief and loss. It's getting a little better, but there's still a lot out there. So just remember to like you're on your own path, you're on your own timeline, stay in your own lane. I've had some very questionable things said to me in my grieving experience. And I used to get very offended by it, but now I'm just like, that's nice. That's a reflection on you and not on me. And that is some trauma that you need to work through. So I'm going to just go ahead
Yeah.
and let you do that or not. And I feel so empowered now in
Mhm.
that. And yeah, I think that's also helped me unlock this kind of like new version of myself too. So yeah, just being confident in who you're becoming. It's going to continue to evolve even outside of your loss. We're people that continue to evolve and change over time. So that doesn't have to be a scary thing. That can actually be a really exciting and very enlightening thing.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you. You have such you're so articulate.
Thank you. I
You're
ramble. So I'm
way
very
more articulate than I am. I can't even say the words.
I'm painfully aware of my rambling, but sometimes I get these downloads and I'm like, I
Yeah.
got to get this out. Sorry. But
No.
yes, I hope that was helpful. Something
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, it's so good. And I feel like you say all these things in like just a very like practical way that makes sense.
Oh, good. I hope so.
So I appreciate that. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was such
Thank
a
you.
fun conversation.
I know. I was saying this to someone recently. I was on this like podcasting panel and I was like, you guys, for how the topic of my podcast, which and yours too, like grief, loss, all the things, right? The number of times that we actually smile and
Yeah.
laugh and are actually having a great time talking about
Yeah.
these things is you would never know. So
Yeah.
hopefully again, this is a testament to the fact that yeah, there's still joy. There's
There
still
is still joy. Yeah.
out there. Yep.
Hmm.
But yeah, thank
Yes.
you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you for being here with me, Laura Walton, and my incredible guest on Grief on Purpose. Your presence is a gift, and I'm so grateful you're walking this path with us. For more connection and resources, you'll find everything you need in the show description. To my guests, thank you for sharing your person with us today. It is truly an honor to know your story. I'm your host, Laura Walton. Until next time, be kind to yourself and remember you're not alone in your grief. We are here on purpose.